Good morning, everyone. I'm Tabitha Hassell. No funny videos today. Wow, no time for that. Happy Monday morning. I'm Tabitha Hassell with Tabs on Tap. I'm going to be joined here very momentarily by Colonel Joe Adams with the Washington Guard. I generally play some kind of video first, but my system. I know Colonel Adams was working on his internet for a while. Now I feel like I'm going to have to do the same. I switched services a couple weeks ago, and now it's like my system is so slow. It took 6 minutes and it's just rolling. You know how it just rolls. So incredibly annoying. But good morning, everyone. I hope you had a really great weekend. As always, lots to talk about today. I worked all weekend, work all week. Nothing unusual for me, but hopefully Colonel Adams will fill us in on his Price of Freedom dinner. Can't wait to talk to him. A lot to talk about today. We're just going to, good morning, Karen, very briefly touch on the Pakistan and Taliban conflict that's taking place, and why do we have to be the world's police? Donald Trump making a very strange statement that he will not be going to heaven. And I will disagree with him. I'm sure everyone will. Lots more to talk about today. But in the meantime, I don't want to keep Colonel Joe Adams waiting. Good morning, Rob, because we've got a lot to. Oh, as soon as he is ready to go, we will be popping him in here. It looks like he knows how slow I am. That's what it is. So we're going to bring Colonel Adams in just a moment here. Some of the other things I'm going to talk about today, obviously 4,000 government workers fired since the government shut down. So, Democrats are going to be speeding things back up. Ceasefire with Israel, between Israel and Hamas, not going to last long. I'm surprised it lasted the entire weekend. So we'll jump into that too. Here is Colonel Joe Adams. Good morning, Colonel Joe Adams with the Washington Guard. How are you doing this morning?
Hi, Tab. Hi, everybody. Nice to be back on Mondays. So,
Yes, yes, yes. Now, obviously, the question on everybody's mind, how was the dinner?
well, I can't take credit for it, but Deanna knocked it out of the park. Every one of our events, it looks like they keep getting better. And there was people there that had attended all four of them now, our fourth annual, and they said this was the best one, the best one ever. So, it
I
was
love
great.
it.
Yeah, the food was great. The energy in the room was great. The speakers were fantastic, and of course, I got up and spoke too, so they had to put up with me. But no, it was just it. I don't anything can get better, but it would be hard to pick this one apart to how we could improve it. So anyway, everybody had a good time, and it was
Well,
we had a
I'm glad
great crowd, and people came. There was a couple of people that came from out of state and to come down to the event that's been there every year. So yeah, thanks to everybody who showed up out there. Tab, we missed you. So we had a great time. You
I
missed a
I
missed a great
know.
event.
I
And
wish I
Dan,
could have been there. I was watching Jamie Allman's videos, and I wish I could have been there. I hated not to be, but duty calls. Unfortunately, work has to come first. But I am so glad that things went well. I knew they would.
yeah,
I knew they would.
oh, Jamie's got a video up. Is that on his Facebook or what is it? Where's
I
the?
saw it on Facebook. Yeah, he's got
Hmm,
a few videos that he took, like, just live streaming, and they were all fantastic.
oh, good. I have to look at that. We gave Otto Matiska the uh, Patriot Award, and of course, Otto's been a good friend of mine for decades and decades. Otto's one of the there's only five master gunsmiths left in the world. There's some great gunsmiths, but five masters, and he's one of them. And we gave him the Patriot Award. Uh, and Jamie was Jamie was Jamie as MC, and you could probably read in that and figure out what I'm talking about. But he was yeah, he was in his own world then. He did a great job. So we had a good time.
I'm glad. I was looking forward to getting to see Jamie and hang out with him a little bit. I hate that I missed it, but you know what? Next year, hopefully I can plan ahead a little bit better and make sure it all works out. But I'm really glad. It's a great thing that you guys are doing. Anything else on the agenda for the Washington Guard in the upcoming weeks?
Let's see. Oh, we got a muster next training muster next Saturday is our first training muster, and we're kicking off a new agenda. that I'm going to have my people start studying and participating in activities pertaining to guerrilla warfare. Uh,
Mm,
yeah, it's because of that last classified memo that I talked about that was declassified, that the imminent attack on our hospitals during Ramadan
yeah.
coming up in February and March. So we're gonna pick up the pace a little bit on how to respond and perform guerrilla warfare. So, and it's because of that. That's what gave me the idea that we're about to be attacked according to DHS, and one attack leads to another. So it's time to get dirty, and that's what we're going to do.
I couldn't agree more. We've talked about it. A couple people messaged me about it over the weekend, wanting me to send something to them. I guess they had talked to people and people were like, "Oh, that's not true. There's no ongoing threat." I'm like, "Oh, it's very true." As a matter of fact, there are 3 ongoing threats just for the people who are not already aware of this. One of them is against politicians, Donald Trump, JD Vance, the entire cabinet, they're at the White House and their family members. Some of these Antifa folks have actually been calling, and now, of course, the threat is from Al Qaeda, but we also face an ongoing threat from Antifa. Antifa has been calling the homes of Donald Trump's cabinet members and leaving some pretty nasty messages. But the DHS gave a very stern warning to Trump, JD Vance, all of his administration members, and they told them. And I don't know who this is, but one civilian, I don't know who that one civilian was, but Al Qaeda made a threat to them, and so the DHS, Department of course, Homeland Security, told them, make sure you're not caught on any surveillance cameras. And I thought that was kind of an odd statement. That when you're out and about, if you're going to restaurants, going out about your time, don't post it on social media. Don't let anyone know where you're at, where you're going, but more importantly, avoid surveillance cameras. Now, Colonel Adams, I'm curious what you think about this. Now, why would they tell Trump's administration, Pete Hegseth in particular, JD Vance, a couple of the others, to avoid surveillance cameras? Are they concerned that maybe Al Qaeda has access to those surveillance feeds, or maybe has people planted in different places and can get access to those feeds? I didn't really understand that threat.
Well, that's why. But good luck avoiding surveillance cameras.
They're everywhere.
Oh, I when I was a private detective for 26 years, I can't, I am so glad that I was in a period of my life and a career that there wasn't any cameras everywhere. I mean, the things I got away with, I could never have gotten away with if they had all those cameras. So I feel sorry for the investigators today. But as far as avoiding it, you can talk all you want to. You can't avoid the cameras. But yeah, we have the technology to tap into theirs, and if we have it, they have it. So anyway, I don't.
Yeah, that's what that's what I was curious about. I'm like, A, how can you avoid the cameras? B,
Can't.
how would they have access to the cameras? And so that was a really strange one to me. And they're, of course, telling the administration members, inform your family members, your children, your spouses, try to not be out in public. I think it's a very credible threat. The second threat being sporting, the usual, nothing unusual here, large events like sporting events, or what was the other, concerts. They said those 2 types of events are under threat, and they've heard in the chatter. And then, of course, the third and most important one that we've been talking about, and I know you went into this a little bit further. I'm going to go into it further just because so many people messaged me over the weekend and said, "Can you talk about it again?" And that is about the threat against specifically the hospitals. And what that threat is, to reiterate, is that we already know Al Qaeda has obtained these uniforms. They have first responder uniforms, police, EMT, paramedic, etc., doctor uniforms. They've already purchased them. So it's not a situation of, is this going to happen someday? No, they are already planning it. They've purchased these uniforms already in 5 different states. They have the transactions. They know they have surveillance video of these individuals purchasing these uniforms. And what the plan is, like you pointed out to us, last week, Colonel Adams, is that the plan is to stage a mass attack at a
Mhm.
hospital or medical facility. And then what they're going to do is they're going to have first responders there, obviously Al Qaeda members, people who who sympathize with Al Qaeda, I should say, because don't think that they're always going to look like a Middle Eastern person. They're not always necessarily going to have brown skin, but they're going to be dressed like police officers or other first responders, and they're going to direct everyone who's fleeing in panic to a certain area. And in that second area, there's going to be another attack, a second attack. So, always be on guard.
Yeah, but if you go to the WashingtonGuard.com, going to what is the website?
TheWashingtonGuard.com.
Yeah, the WashingtonGuard.com, the website. Deanna posted that entire document on there, so you can see the requirements. I mean, obviously, we have somebody inside, and they know we have somebody inside, but psychologically, this document that's been produced and declassified that I've had for a long time, which would be better? So the bad guys know we're on to them, right? So the obvious thing is that they know they can't get away with it, so they cancel. They put it off. False flags, right? Like the kid that yelled, cried wolf all the time. By the time it happened, everybody was numb to that environment. Or they do that in spite of the fact that we know about it, because that's even greater. The fact that we know about it and have posted it, the average person, just go to our website and you'll see all the document there. Just because, what would be a greater victory if they did it anyway? I think so. And these people are so crazy. I don't doubt it at all.
They'll do it. Yeah, they'll do it anyway. You know why? Because this is a coordinated attack at multiple different areas. So therefore, their plan is that on one specific day, they're going to attack several hospitals and healthcare facilities across the country. Of course, the obvious areas: Chicago, New York, New York City, Los Angeles, there were Miami, Houston. There were several different cities named where these individuals purchased uniforms. So therefore, they think these cities are on that target list. But and I'm sure, in Colonel Adams, I know you know this. I don't know if everyone else does, but the reason why the Department of Homeland Security is so sure that this is going to happen is because they've seen the surveillance that Al Qaeda has already done. Al Qaeda has gone to these healthcare facilities and they have surveillance of these different hospitals and healthcare facilities. So they've already been there. But Colonel Adams, here's something I want to ask you about, and this is a personal question from me, is that why don't local police departments take this type of threat seriously? Because I'll tell you something that happened to me specifically. I saw it with my own eyes. I was outside of Busch Stadium. This was probably 3 or 4 years ago, maybe longer ago. I was outside of Busch Stadium. It was not a game day. And I can't even remember why I was there. It was a radio thing, somewhere else, but I happened to park by Busch Stadium. I was standing there talking to a friend. I saw this guy come up. He looked homeless. I mean, the guy looked dirty, homeless, Middle Eastern man. He was wearing this big poncho. And, he just looked, how a homeless person would look. He looked dirty and so on. But he walked up to several hundred feet away from Busch Stadium. And out from his shawl, he took this very high-tech camera and started taking photos of Busch Stadium. And I looked like, what is going on here? Then he put the camera back under his shawl and he walked down the alley. I'm like, there is something not right here.
Yeah, what's wrong with that picture, right?
And I talked to somebody I knew, from the SLMPD, and he's like, oh, that's nothing. No big deal. I'm like, are you kidding me? There is something very weird about what I just saw. So that's why I'm telling people, if you see something, say something. If the first time they dismiss it, then you know what? Get a hold of someone else.
Yeah, indicators. There's always indicators. Hey, Deanna just passed me a note. Hey, that document, that declassified document on the Washington Guard website, it's on the members only site. So I'm sorry about that. So anyway, so join the Guard, you can read the document.
Right.
Yes.
And get prepared for it, on top of that.
That's if you ask the average person, what we're talking about here cannot be fathomed by the average person. Me being a whatever I am, an old Marine, I understand these things, and especially the psychological operations behind it. I mean, I wrote the manual for the military of psychological operations. So believe me, I'm inside their head and I know what they're thinking. But we talked about this at the banquet, and there's something you have to understand. Complicity will get your ass killed. And complicity makes you comfortable. Oh, that can never happen. Oh, that'll work itself out. Well, guess what? Those days are gone. And that's a very, very dangerous thing. And the bad guys know about the complicity of Americans. It'll always work itself out. We didn't get invaded World War I. We didn't get invaded World War II. We always win. And they go about their daily business. We'll go about your daily business, but you better start paying attention because
You
it's coming.
you're
Look,
right.
I told them at the banquet, sooner than later, we're going to go to war with Islam in this country. And I bet you even the people that came to the banks are going like, oh, I don't think so. Anyway, hesitation kills, but complicity is the ally of the enemy. You've got to stop that. And people that say, I don't want to walk around all day long and be paranoid and looking over my shoulder. Well, you'd rather be dead.
Well,
You'd rather be
and
dead.
Colonel Adams, and I know you know this, but once you train yourself to be situationally aware, you do it involuntarily. Does that make sense? You're not even, it's subconsciously. I've been doing it for so long that it's just part of my human nature to come in and look around, or when I'm pulling up to my home to make sure no one's been following me or that no one's in the perimeter of my home. It may seem at first like paranoia, but eventually it becomes second nature and you don't even realize it. It's not a burden once you've been doing it for a long time.
That's right. It's all of my adult life. I've been that way.
Right, right.
So
And I had a stalker years ago, which I'll spare the story for another time. I've had three crazy stalkers, but one in particular, came to my home, and it was a very scary situation. And so therefore I learned, at a very young age to start looking around and being aware. And once you start doing it, you just do it.
yeah, you got to flip on the survival mode switch. And also, my wife just passed me a note that says it's complacency, not complicity. Anyway, you get the message. So
And Colonel Adams,
it's both. It's both.
it is. This weekend, part of what I was working on, a project I'm working on, I sat and I listened to hours, and I do mean hours of 911 calls. And one thing that stood out to me, and I thought about you in the Washington Guard. One thing that stood out to me, and this, I mean, hundreds of 911 calls. These were all 911 calls that ended in a homicide. And I will tell you what, well, I take that back. Two of them did not end up in a homicide. And the two that didn't end up in a homicide is because those two people got lucky. They were hiding in a closet as somebody was trying to break into their home, and the police did get there and was able to stop the person before they got to the victim. All of the other cases, every single one of them, was a situation where someone was in their vehicle, at their home, wherever they may have been, sometimes already abducted, and they called 911. And it was so frustrating to listen to some of these calls, because it made me realize that not all 911, dispatchers know what they're doing, or, and can help a person. And then otherwise, you know what, people, none of these people were armed. And well, I take that back also. Three of them were armed and did not use their weapon or could not get to their weapon. And so I wanted to talk to you a little bit about that, because when you think about it, I probably listened about 200, 300 calls, maybe more than that. And 98% of the time, the person was murdered before police could get there.
First responders, you how
And
many
it's not
times?
their fault. I'm not blaming it on first responders, of course.
No, you blame it on yourself. First responders they've never changed. They respond to an incident that's happening or already happened. But
That's right.
that time factor before they get there will get you killed. And so, I mean, at any time, and when it happens, one thing universally about these incidents, the fact that it happens just in a blink of a moment, and you're in trouble. Look at
It,
the McCloskeys are the best example, sitting at home in their mansion, gated community, security guards in the community, private streets, fenced in with for protection, sitting there watching TV on a Sunday afternoon, and Antifa strikes their home out of nowhere, broke down the gates, got past security, and is threatening to burn their house down. And the only thing that saved them, that Mark McCloskey had AR-15 handy by the door. And
Yes.
remember, I told you before, it happened so fast he didn't even have time to put his shoes on.
Right.
Don't face down a crowd barefoot if you can help that. They call 911. The cops show up 4 hours later.
Right.
Running.
Yeah, it's exceptionally so, in the city of St. Louis or other, big metropolitan areas. I don't blame it on first responders. And every single
No.
call I listened, dispatch got somebody on the way. But you don't know. The police, some towns only have a couple, like where I live right now. I think we might have 2 or 3, on duty at one time because it's a small town, 7,000 people. Big city obviously has more, but all of our police departments across the country are short staffed. We all know that. And not only that, but they might be just uh, they might, sorry, I just heard a strange noise. They might be just sitting, a mile away writing somebody a ticket. Then they get the call and they got to get back in their car and drive there. And as you know, things can happen very quickly in a matter of a second.
Yep.
2, 3. I counted the seconds in some of these calls. Some of them were less than 5 seconds. Somebody calls, somebody, starts firing shots like immediately or worse.
Yeah,
There's no time to waste.
That's why God invented double barrel shotguns. So anyway, complicity, complacency, whatever my wife said, will get you killed. The other thing, people don't like the word inevitable. They try to stay away from that. And I'm telling you, people, listen to me. It's inevitable that we're going to have a war, civil wars, spontaneous civil war is going to happen fast within this country because understand, the bad guys know what they're doing. The bad guys know the agenda. We don't know that. We guess their agenda and through sources. They know what they're doing. We just are guessing of what they're going to do. But anyway, it's inevitable.
And well, Colonel Adams, I said this after I know we had you on Friday, and then right after you left a little while later, I said I believe this is my own opinion. We're already at war because a civil war because when you have groups like Antifa, the Revolutionary Communist Party, the other communist parties that have recently formed outside of ICE facilities, ramming their vehicles into ICE officers. And have you seen out in Broadview, Illinois, they have put up barricades. They had to fence the whole area in to keep Antifa folks back a little bit further. We're already at war. When these people are calling our legislators' homes and threatening them, they're showing up on their doorsteps or planting incendiary devices in different areas. That is war. I mean, it is war. I don't know. Everybody wants to say it's not, but it is war.
That's guerrilla warfare. And the psychological effects of guerrilla warfare, part of guerrilla warfare is psychological, defeating the enemy without firing a shot. These incendiary bombs, and they're going to start putting phony bombs around. People say, oh, that's a phony bomb. Well, guess what? 1 out of 10 is not. So all of these things, you're right. And I stay away from the comment that we're already at war. Once we start, I'm not talking about a war of words. I'm talking about physical engagements, combat, right here in the United States. And I told them, like when I spoke, we're going to be attacked. It's imminent. But
no question.
It's not from outside armies hitting our borders because the enemy is already here. The enemy is amongst us. And how is it possible that all these things? How is it possible that the enemy is within our borders already? The invaders have already invaded. They just haven't fired the first shot.
Well, there's no question. In the same report you and I have seen, that is one of the bigger statements in that report is they're already here. The members of Al Qaeda who have made these threats are already here within our borders. They're already in our country. They've already done the surveillance. They've already purchased the uniforms. They are just waiting for the call to say, hey, today's a go.
Yeah, and this all goes back. It's the treasonous elected officials and the treasonous appointed officials by those politicians. It's the politicians that's created this thing, and of course they want to. When you've got people like Obama, Biden, Brennan, McCabe, Clapper, Hillary, what do you expect? And they know they've got a place in the bunker. If you understand what that means, but I
Oh,
think,
of course they do. We
well,
don't, but they do.
oh, oh, thanks to Comey, they might have lost their seat in the bunker because there's another phase of this coming, and it has to do with Hillary Clinton. Now, if you've noticed, kind of shockingly, lately, Hillary has kind of warmed up to Donald Trump. Did you see that?
No, I have missed that.
Oh, no. Yeah. Even her comments on the ceasefire and stuff, she's giving Trump the credit and she's warming up. You know, here's why she's warming up. And she did something a couple months ago about agreed with Trump, and the Democrats went crazy. So, and it's about her server that she
Oh,
torched.
right, which is a really big deal and something she should have been prosecuted for
Well,
a long time ago.
it's about to get bigger because this
I hope.
you know, everything that was happened, the Steele dossier, there's burning the server, all these things. How come Hillary's name is always in there? So even she was, I saw her on last night talking about how good a job Donald Trump's doing, and she did something a few months ago about when the Democrats went nuts because she praised Donald Trump. She's in deep quiche, man. So Comey says that he did the investigation and found negligence, but no really criminal intent, right? Well, Comey not only did the investigation, and Donald Trump knows this. Comey and his Black Ops FBI are the ones who went in and did that for Hillary. They destroyed the evidence. They destroyed her servers. They destroyed all those ghost phones she had. And why would they do that? Because
Right.
that's how they communicated.
Yeah, I
Obama, Biden,
remember.
Brennan, McCabe, Clapper, Hillary, and
I
Comey.
remember all
That
that. Yeah.
that's them.
Yeah, they bleach bit. Remember all of her administration's, all of her staff members' devices. 33,000 emails that were deleted,
Yeah,
many of them classified coming through. Remember at her home, she had that server in her bathroom. Remember that? It was a bathroom and she had a server in there and was receiving classified documentation at her home. And it's insane. But Colonel Adams, I don't think I love seeing them indicted or brought before court, even though they refuse to do the perp walks because they still have a lot of buddies on the inside. But I'll tell you, I don't expect any of them to ever spend a day in jail. I don't know how you feel about that. I don't see that ever happening. I still feel like it's all theater at this point.
you're right. Yeah, you're right. I was just thinking about that. That's right. I left the event and came home and watching Svengali. I thought about that. I said, I'll bet not neither any of these people will see a day in jail.
They won't see a day in jail. And I don't know if you heard Donald Trump's comment. I played it on the show a couple weeks ago. And his own words, he said, he was talking to a staffer and he said, my voters are unhappy right now. I have people turning against me. And they're turning against me because they want to see action. So let's give them what they want. They want arrests. Let's give them arrests. But you know what? He never said, let's give them convictions or anything else. I do. This is not going against Donald Trump. I do think that it's all just theater. Let's go make these indictments. Let's go arrest these people because that's what my voters want. Let's give them a little of what they want, and then it'll probably all go away.
Yeah, people like you and I go to jail. People like
That's
them,
right.
nah, not really. And they tried to put me in jail for 43 years back in the 80s, late 80s, for fighting communism. I mean, so they weren't successful because I beat them. I beat them on every avenue about the incidents that happened down there. And did I go into Nicaragua and bad operations and shoot bad guys? Because the FBI was on my side. So they're trying to change the reports and all of that. And they said, no, you really didn't. I go, yes, I did. Why should I be ashamed of that?
Right.
And they said, yeah,
Absolutely.
but you're going to end up going to jail. I said, well, okay, if I go to jail for fighting communism, I'll get out someday and I'll do it again. And I told the judge that. Go ahead and put me in jail. I will get out. And when I get out, I'll do it again. Of course, he saw it my way, and that was it. He
And
set
now
me
we see
one day probation.
the
So,
communists prevailing now.
oh yeah, hey, you're right. Yeah, she just handed me another note. So I didn't get this into my speech at the event, but I've got it, and I've been withholding this from you because I wanted to use it at the event. So when I started talking about my indictments, me and Colonel North and Admiral Poindexter, General Secord, and the CIA station chief, they're going to lock us all up, right? So in those days, I drove a semi-bulletproof car, and it had a bumper sticker on it, and the bumper sticker read, "Kill a commie for mommy." So then I thought about that. I think I still got that bumper. So I sold the car, kept the sticker because of what it said. In fact, I was doing a speech. I was a guest host at the Soldier Fortune convention out in Las Vegas, and somebody was selling those bumper stickers. And we're fighting communism at the same time in Nicaragua. So that was my favorite book. But think about how things have changed. If I put that bumper sticker on my car now, that would be like threatening part of Congress and especially AOC. So that they could take that as a threat.
And you'll be attacked because
my point is this:
communists these days.
The communists are now part of the Democrat Party.
They are the Democrat Party.
Now that would be a threat to our politicians. I was pointing at the communists. Now it's the same thing.
The leaders, right? The leaders. I want to make sure I always differentiate that. A lot of the people we know in our communities, they have not yet, they're also brainwashed. They have not yet figured out that the leaders of their party are for socialism and communism and terrorism. They just don't get it. They do not understand.
Do you remember, I talked about Otto Matiska, they got the award. He's going to do Jamie Allman's show on Wednesday. Now, what Jamie doesn't know, and I'll call Jamie today, I'm going to be on the show too. And I'm going to ask him if I can be on the show. No, I'll just tell him I'm going to be on the show, and I'm going to go with Otto down there. So now, do you remember Otto, Tab?
I do. We interviewed him a couple of years ago. I do. Absolutely. I remember. Fantastic person.
Yeah. When he did your show, it was at 93.3.
It was a real talk.
Now, he's been my best friend for over 50 years. And I didn't know that part of Otto. When I brought him on the show, I was concerned because, I'm a show off. I can get on the show. I'm comfortable. I don't get nervous. But Otto's he's a gunsmith. And he don't speak that great English, which I'm always bringing up.
I thought he did great.
He blew you away. Think out. I did not know that part about Otto. I've never seen that side before. And he said things like, when the police, they had the haircut police, where the police patrolled the streets. If they didn't like your haircut, they took clippers out and cut your hair because you weren't allowed to have long hair.
His days living in communism.
Right, and that's the point. That's what he talked about on your show, living under communism.
Yeah,
I was shocked. Him and I had never had those conversations. Anyways, doing Jamie's show this Wednesday, and as of right now, I plan on being on the show with Otto. So.
Excellent. Well, I hope everyone tunes in because, I remember very clearly the interview with Otto and how he talked about what it was like, living under communism and how Americans, a lot of Americans, particularly, the folks on the left, they don't really understand truly what it's like to live under socialism and communism. And Colonel Adams, I talked about this a little bit on Friday and talking about Cisco Foods. How Cisco has a monopoly on food service where it doesn't matter how many restaurants you go to in one area, you're going to get the same food because they all have the same supplier. And that's a lot what communism is it limits your choices. You might have 2 or 3 different types of shoes to choose from, 2 or 3 different types of sweaters or jackets. And people don't understand. You get food rations and they think it can't ever happen here. But it absolutely can happen here. As a matter of fact, prior to Donald Trump, we were on the fast track to socialism. And you can see that through the monopolies that take place within these big corporations. What's going to happen someday when the only store you can shop at is Walmart and the only food choices you have is what their buyer purchases? And people don't understand that that's actually very close to being a reality already.
Yeah, but it's really important for your listeners to check out Jamie's show on Wednesday because how you live under communism, and it is the little things. One of the things that the state owns everything, you own nothing.
Right.
Everybody makes the thing. The doctors, the reason they don't have good doctors because The doctor makes the same as a common laborer in a communist country. Now, when I was in Croatia, that was a communist country. It was a Stalin satellite country. And if you were a card carrying communist, not a Croatian, a card carrying communist, you got free train ride, your houses is paid for, your apartments paid for. They have all these benefits, and you could be police officers. The non-communists living in Croatia had none of those things. None of those things. They were never allowed to be officers. They never allowed to be pilots because the communists were afraid they're going to steal the airplanes, which was true. So it's a whole different world, and you have no rights. There's no trials. If you have it, if the government gives you a job, that's your job. But you can change jobs with permission. So you can leave that job and go to another job. But if you don't get that job or acquire a job within a couple of weeks, you go to prison for stealing from the government.
Right. It's a very serious, and you know what? Here's a flip side to that, Colonel Adams, or I should say, a different angle to look at it. Also, in the United States, is we think about communism being people like the Revolutionary Communist Party or Antifa, but what about Islam? You know, we have that Mom Donnie in New York City who absolutely supports socialism. There's no question about it. You know, I think about we talk about the limited choices. You know, under communism and socialism, think about the limited choices under Islam. What do you get to wear today? A black burqa or a black burqa? You know, I mean, what do you get to eat? Halal meat. You know, you're very, very limited in all fashions. And what does Islam want? They want socialism. They want communism because that's how they hold power. And they've not denied it by any means.
Treason, treasonous elected politicians is the root of all evil in this country. I got to run. I got to make some phone calls. Hey, but I'm going to leave you with this one thought. And I, I did this at the banquet on Saturday. Now everybody knows that Hillary Clinton. I can't get away from Hillary. Hillary the Killery. Everybody knows that Hillary wants AR-15s banned. She's signed on all this stuff. They want the guns, but they're targeting AR-15s. We don't need AR-15s. That's a military. I don't care what they think. So Hillary wants to ban AR-15s because they're a threat to the public, and they've killed people. They want the AR-15 off.
Oh, of course. Well,
off the
of
street.
course they do.
But what I said at the banquet was, I think if you really want to save lives, we should ban Hillary Clinton because everybody knows she's killed more people than any AR-15. Hey, thanks, guys. I'll see you next Monday.
Thank you, Colonel Joe Adams of the Washington Guard. So happy to see you today. Thank you again for joining us, and I hope you have a great week. That was Colonel Joe Adams of the Washington Guard. Always so happy to have him on the show. We kept him for a long time today. I know he's a very busy man, so we're very happy to have him for as long as we did. One thing I meant to ask him about and didn't get around to it, and I didn't want to keep him longer. But I would, if he's still listening, maybe he'll comment on the comment line. But one of the things that's on my mind today is the conflict that's going on between Pakistan and the Taliban. Now, it's kind of interesting to me. It's like terrorists fighting against terrorists. Pakistan has become, and this is, I've been talking, if you guys listen to the show, you've heard me talk about Pakistan a lot. It worries me. Pakistan has become a hotbed of terrorism. And what is so important about that factor is that they have about 170 nuclear warheads. So that means that, of course, the terrorists have the nuclear weapons. Of course they do. Now, the Taliban allegedly they don't have any nuclear warheads in Afghanistan. Now we know they probably do, maybe in the way of suitcase bombs, dirty bombs, etc. Nothing that they're not manufacturing weapons there; they are purchasing them. Now Pakistan's a different story. Now, why this skirmish started, I'm not even 100% sure. They've had a lot of fighting back and forth against that border between Pakistan and Afghanistan for a very long time. But what it is it's one terrorist faction against the other. Of course, we have the Taliban who has taken over Afghanistan. They are the actual government, which is really scary to think that the Taliban is the government of Afghanistan. And then we have Pakistan. Now, while Pakistan's government isn't exactly terrorists, but they do house terrorists. If you remember, Osama bin Laden, by the way, did take cover in Pakistan. If you can recall, that's where SEAL Team 6 located him. And then we also have a hotbed of ISIS that is currently in Pakistan. And there's a lot of terrorism. A lot of people in Pakistan have had to flee as ISIS moved in. So as ISIS was pushed out of Syria, they went to Turkey, and a lot of them went to Pakistan, and that's where they remain. So the Taliban claims that the reason why they are attacking Pakistan is because Pakistan has become this hotbed of ISIS terrorism. And again, we talk about the fight between Christians and Islam, and we have all these different Islamic groups. So of course want to take over our country. They want to take over every country. They want to make sure that everybody in the world is Islamic, is Muslim. And so that's something we already know. We've talked about. What some people don't understand is that within the Islam faith, there's also different factions that fight each other. We saw that play out in Syria. I don't want to go too deep here because it'll probably bore the heck out of you guys, but we saw that in Syria where we, the United States, we under Obama had that Project Timber Sycamore. Now Al Qaeda is the group running Syria right now, and we largely placed them there. And I hate to say that, but that happened under Donald Trump's term. We didn't do anything to stop it from happening, unfortunately. And I don't know that we could have, because the power was more great, I think, than anything we were willing to go in and do. But there we had that situation under Obama where we, the United States, were pretending that we were there to fight ISIS when in fact we were really there to help Al Qaeda oust Assad so that Al Qaeda could take over the country of Syria. And so we were fighting against ISIS to some degree because ISIS wanted to take over Syria. So we had a situation there. It was the same thing, two different factions of Islam that wanted control over Syria, ISIS versus Al Qaeda. Al Qaeda won that battle. It took a long time, but they won that battle. But you know what? Whenever we pushed ISIS out of Syria, we did not kill them. We did not imprison them. We created under Obama safe passage. So we took all of these ISIS members under the safe passage rule, and we allowed them to go north into Idlib, and then we allowed them to go into Turkey or into Pakistan and a couple of other areas. Some made their way here to the United States, believe it or not, and are still here. And so the situation between Pakistan and uh, Afghanistan worries me because now Donald Trump, God knows I love Donald Trump, of course, but we are being, once again, the world's police. Donald Trump wants to have peace between Afghanistan, the Taliban, and Pakistan housing ISIS. And I think that this is a situation we need to stay out of. It's a different thing for Donald Trump to get in the middle and try to create peace between, let's say, Russia and Ukraine, because they're going to use diplomacy. They're going to use diplomacy. Putin is going to use diplomacy. Ukraine is controlled by NATO. They're going to use diplomacy. Now, whenever it comes to Israel and Hamas, Israel, of course, is going to use diplomacy. We already know Hamas is going to resort to terror tactics, but there is some diplomacy there as well. Now, when it comes to Afghanistan and Pakistan, there's going to be no diplomacy. This is one terror faction against another terror faction. They're not part of NATO. They're not part of any of these other groups. They're just simply terrorists who would love to eliminate the other one because they each want to control. ISIS wants to control Afghanistan. They want to replace the Taliban. The Taliban is not trying to replace ISIS in Pakistan, but they don't want them within their borders. And now we have Donald Trump speaking up, saying he's going to create peace. So that means he's going to sit down with the Taliban and talk about a peace plan. He's going to sit down with the Pakistani government and talk about a peace plan. And it's kind of one of those situations, like let's say you have crazy neighbors down the street and they're far enough down where they're feuding and they got all this stuff going on, a lot of drama, but they're not so close where you have to see it every day. And it doesn't really affect you other than them being down your street and you just try to avoid them. And what happens if you go walk down the street and you get in the middle of this neighbor feud? Well, guess what? It's going to come down your way, isn't it? And then they're going to notice you. Sometimes it's better to just leave things alone. and not draw attention to yourself. I don't want to draw attention to the United States and Americans because we get involved in this ridiculous war between Pakistan and Afghanistan, two opposing terror factions. Let's just stay out of it. How about that? I feel like we voted for Donald Trump because we want America first. And we've seen a lot of America first. I'm not complaining about President Trump. I never expected him to be perfect or to do everything perfectly, but I feel that he has tried so hard. His legacy, you have to remember that when somebody is elected, they want to leave behind a legacy. And I feel like he got cheated out of a legacy in his first term because everything he did or tried to do, they stopped him in every way they possibly could. He was constantly fighting battle after battle just to try to put America first. And now he got this second chance and he wants to make sure he has this lasting legacy, and that legacy is creating peace. And we know this already. And it's unfortunate he didn't win the Nobel Peace Prize, which, by the way, if you heard the committee, the Nobel Peace Prize committee made a direct statement and said that they only give the award to people who exemplify courage and integrity. And that was, a direct aim, of course, at Donald Trump. But for me personally, I'm ready to get back to America first. We have peace. It's not lasting peace. I promise you that. You guys probably think, oh, don't be, so down on what's going on between Israel and the folks over in Gaza. But I can promise you that peace situation will not last long. I was actually shocked that it lasted over the weekend because we know that those 20 hostages were returned. I've heard not in the best shape. And there were also bodies that were returned back to Israel. And you can be guaranteed that Netanyahu is very upset. In fact, he declined Donald Trump's invitation to attend the peace summit in Egypt, where they're trying to also work on guaranteeing that peace between Gaza and Israel. I don't think it's going to last very long. But, Donald Trump did his part. He did his part. He got a peace agreement. It's not his fault that it won't last. He's still working with Russia. In fact, I'm going to play this for you really quick. This is just an audio clip. We're still talking about sending Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine. Now, I don't expect this to actually happen, but this is kind of a dangerous game I think we're playing back and forth with Putin. Now, to some degree, again, I think a lot of what's going on is theater. Just, we just talked about theater with the Comey indictment and all this other stuff. I think a lot of this talk is also theater that, oh, let's tell Putin we're going to send those Tomahawk missiles if he doesn't agree to peace. Now, I think Putin has actually made a statement already. And he said, if you, the United States, send Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine for them to use them against Russia, not only will we retaliate, but we will retaliate against you on your own soil. So it was a very direct threat from Putin to the United States that if we give these Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine, that we are no longer going to be safe and from attack on our own soil. So it's a very serious conversation. And I think that Donald Trump, and I know he knows what he's doing, he is the master of negotiation, no question about it. But this is a very telling statement. Now, this is audio only, there's no video.
I'd have to speak to Russia, to be honest with you, about Tomahawks. Do they want to have Tomahawks going in their direction? I don't think so. I think I might speak to Russia about that, in all fairness. I told that to President Zelensky because Tomahawks are a new step of aggression. Right? You understand that very well.
Are you saying that you will speak to Putin first about Tomahawks?
I might talk to him. I might say, look, if this war's not going to get settled, I'm going to send them Tomahawks. I may say that. The Tomahawk is an incredible weapon, very offensive weapon. And honestly, Russia does not need that. They don't need that. Yeah, I might tell.
So this was a conversation that took place with Donald Trump on Air Force One on October 12th. It was a longer part of a longer conversation he had with press. And again, Putin has already addressed the issue of Tomahawk missiles. If we give Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine, we're in a lot of trouble. The war is on. And I will tell you one thing, and I think you guys already know this if you've listened to the show for any length of time, nothing can compete with the Oreshnik missile that Russia has. A Tomahawk certainly cannot. And the Oreshnik missile tops all of them. In fact, it is more powerful than a nuclear weapon. It doesn't have the fallout, but it has the destruction of a nuclear weapon. If you're familiar with how a nuclear weapon works at the point of impact, it just disintegrates everything in that point of impact. But then you have your nuclear fallout, and the nuclear fallout produces, other waves, kind of, I guess you could use the word attack, other waves that come out and give a nuclear radiation. It's very damaging, of course, to the environment, long lasting for a very long time, very difficult to recover from. Well, the Oreshnik has the power of a nuclear weapon. It uses kinetic energy, and it will disintegrate everything with that same blast zone as a nuclear weapon would. However, it doesn't have that lasting fallout, again, that a nuclear weapon has. So there's nothing we can do to beat that. We don't have any type of defense system that would strike down this Oreshnik missile. It's extremely fast, faster than anything we've ever seen in any type of technology. The United States does not have any type of weapon that will compete or that will defend us against the Oreshnik. Now, they can't reach us with the Oreshnik, but I can promise you they will find a way if they need to find a way. But we have to stop all of these wars. We just have to stay out of it. I don't know about you guys. I don't want to be in the middle of any of it. Yes, Israel is our ally. Yes, we have to do what we can to protect Israel and their right to exist, of course. Ukraine is not our business. Whatever is going on between Ukraine and Russia has nothing to do with us. And I don't understand why President Trump continues to defend Ukraine outside of the fact that if Ukraine can hold some of their land and not get wholly taken over by Russia, maybe we'll make that rare earth mineral deal, get some of which we already have made a small deal, but maybe we'll make a much larger deal. But that's our only stake as Republicans, as conservatives in Ukraine, is rare earth minerals. There is nothing else there for us. Maybe some strategic ports in the Black Sea, but we're not going to take those either way. It is all about rare earth minerals. However, for Democrats, it was a different story. Democrats protected Ukraine. I don't remember a Democrat ever talking about the rare earth minerals in Ukraine. Not ever once was that ever mentioned, or did they ever make any rare earth mineral deals? Because our under Democrat rule, they didn't care about the military. They didn't care about defensive. We gave $350 billion to Ukraine to protect Democrat dirty secrets. We all know that. And look what's happened as a result. France has had to their government had completely fallen. They have an entirely new government now in France. That just happened over the weekend. Still ran by Macron, but Macron is just a puppet. We all know that. And so we're never going to solve this situation with Russia and Ukraine. In my opinion, we just need to cut any type of aid, any type of funding. That's what we voted for to Ukraine. It is not our business. We just don't care. Let's just end it. Let's bring our money back here. Can you imagine if we spent $350 billion right here in the United States? How great that would be, instead of giving it to Ukraine, where most of it went to terrorists and into Zelensky's pockets. And that's a fact. And now we're going to get involved with Pakistan and Afghanistan. I don't think that's a good idea. We've given billions of dollars recently to Israel. We've given billions of dollars. I know there was another a country, I can't recall who it is right now. I know maybe it was Ukraine that I'm thinking of. We've given a lot more money to Ukraine. And what happened to America first? What happened to America first? Why aren't we using that money in America? How about we draw that line around our borders and every single dollar stays within those borders? There is nothing we have to do right now that is of any extreme urgency to be giving money to other countries. I'm so frustrated with it. I'm so frustrated. I don't know how you guys feel about it, but I'm really frustrated. Let's see here. Jay says, whatever you think we have, the military has something better we don't know about. Maybe, Jay, I hope you're right. I know we, the United States, but here, Jay, the reason why I have a hard time agreeing with that statement is because we have to remember that our military for the past few years has been run by Democrats. Prior to, of course, prior to Donald Trump winning, we had Obama, didn't care about the military. And then we had Donald Trump, who bolstered the military. Then we had those 4 years under Biden, who again didn't care about the military. We are at a shortage of missiles. We are at a shortage of fuel. If we were to go to war today, we wouldn't even have the fuel stockpiles to go to war. And that's also a fact. And you hear different generals, General Flynn, in fact, talking about those types of things. Colonel McGregor talks about those types of things. We're not ready. We have put our military on the back burner for so long that, drones, our drone technology is really bad. It's really bad. We're really bad at intercepting drones, and we're really bad at making drones. We are far behind in the drone game. And that also is a fact. Now, we might have some weapons out there, of course, that we don't know about. People talk about laser weapons coming from satellites, direct energy weapons, and that type of thing. And yes, we certainly do have direct energy weapons. That's kind of one of those disputed things. They say, oh, we really don't, but yes, we really do. Of course, I think we do. But I think that Russia is a very formidable force. I don't see us ever having a direct war with Russia. I don't think Trump would ever allow us to be in a direct war with Russia. But I do think that either he is threatening Putin, or it's just more theater for Ukraine. I don't really know what's going on. I really thought that situation with Russia and Ukraine would have ended about 3 days after it started. However, considering under Biden, we continued to send money to Ukraine. All of NATO sent money. Of course, it's going to continue. Jay says, either, not rather. I'm not sure what you mean, Jay. Either, not rather. And Jay says, there's always a new thing in the works. Oh, I see. Rather, either through the government or private contractors. Yeah, but look who our private contractors are now, Jay. It's Zuckerberg, it's Meta, it's Google, it's Microsoft. All of these people have all these big government contracts. It's not like the old days. We have these other companies who used to make all of our weaponry, who are right on top of things, and now we've got all these other people moving into the mix who are talking about space wars. And I feel like sometimes we're living in this really weird world of idiocracy. It's like, how do these people get government contracts? Why is it that Bill Gates and Microsoft, or Bezos and Amazon, and we have Zuckerberg with Meta? These are all our government contractors now. Now, of course, we still have the others, but these guys are moving up very quickly in the ranks when it comes to these government contracts. It's pretty crazy stuff, in my opinion. That's for sure. And Lori says, I feel the exact same way. I can't imagine any American that doesn't want to see us thrive. Mental health, veterans, infrastructure, the list is huge. Laura, you got that right. The list is really huge. And, we've talked a lot about the prices of beef. And, it's kind of funny. And this happens pretty often. We've been talking on this show about the price of beef for a little while, and how it's going to triple in cost. And finally, I saw a news headline over the weekend: prices for beef soar. I saw people posting this weekend. One person posted a package of 3 sirloin steaks. It was $125. We knew, didn't we? We've been talking about this for a little while, because the ranchers were talking about it, and they were saying, hey, when we go to the market and we're selling our calves for 3 times what we normally get, guess what that means, consumers? Your prices are going to go up. And here we are. The prices have gone up astronomically, and they're going to continue to go up. I would suggest finding some good chicken recipes. And then what are we going to do? Whenever the chicken industry, Tyson or one of these other big groups, they decide, hey, we're the alternative. People can't afford to buy beef. So they're moving to poultry. They're going to be buying chicken and turkey. So why don't we competitively raise our prices? Because they can't afford the beef. So they have no choice, if they want some good protein, to buy some chicken or turkey. So why don't we also raise our prices to be a little bit more competitive with the beef? So then you can expect all of the prices to continue going up. And again, this is not against Donald Trump. It has nothing to do with him. He's a very busy man. His administration is dealing with our national security and all of these threats, all of these other conflicts going on outside of our borders. But who is it that's trying to regulate the industry of our meat processors? That's what I'd like to know. Who's talking about the price of food these days? No one is. That's who. Absolutely no one is. And I would really like to hear the Trump administration say, you know what, we realize that you, the American homeowner, the American voter, I should say, and the American voter, what are we doing to help you? You know, your insurance prices are sky high. You can't afford to eat beef now. Most Americans can't. Your rents are sky high. Your interest is sky high. Your property tax is sky high. Now, Donald Trump has said he hopes that no Americans have to pay property tax, and they're going to certainly work on that. I would like to see that happen soon. Maybe that will leverage out the money you have to pay if you want to eat some beef. But what are we going to do when these prices continue? Why isn't anyone doing anything or talking about it? If I was the president of this country, I would be, instead of being over in Israel right now, heading to Egypt, working out peace for other countries, I would be right there in the White House on a microphone, giving a message to all Americans saying, hey, I know you're hurting right now. I know you can't afford anything right now. I know you're one paycheck away from being out on the streets. And this is what I'm going to do to help you. That's all I want. That's exactly what I want. And I know I'm impatient. I want it to happen today. It's not happening today. But when is it going to happen? That's what I'd like to know. I don't care about what's going on over in Pakistan. I don't care what's going on over in Afghanistan. I could care less. Nothing that's happening in those two countries affects us all. And I know people will say, well, what if they get into nuclear war? And, you know, Pakistan has all these nuclear warheads. Taliban has dirty bombs. Let them, you know, hurt each other. I don't think either one of them is going to ever use any type of nuclear weapon, because then they would be annihilated. They would be wiped off the face of the earth. And we all know that they don't want that to happen, because then they can't take over the world. So I don't expect that to happen. How about we stay out of their business and start doing something about what's going on right here in our own country? How about that? You know, crime, ridiculous. Houston, we have 53 people who've been found now in Houston bayous since 2023. 56 people, I think, is the actual number. We're going to talk more about that tomorrow. What are we doing about that? What are we doing about crime in the United States? Yes, we're trying. We just made a lot of arrests here in the state of Illinois. There's been a lot of arrests in the state of Missouri. You know, we've got the National Guard in Memphis, Tennessee, making arrests. We're doing our best. But you know what? Yes, that's step number one. Let's make our homes safe again. Step number two, how about we bring some of these costs down so that you're not working yourself to death? You know, Monday through Friday, you come home on the weekend and you're sitting around worried about money and how you're going to be able to afford bills. I just saw a post, some of you may have seen it too, depending on what kind of groups you're in, about and I felt bad because, man, these people got blasted. It was a man and wife, and some of you may have seen this post online because it was local to St. Charles. Well, this mom and dad, they had 4 children, and they wanted to give their children a reward. And the children had done really good in school. They'd done all their chores. They did all the things that children should do to be good little children. So they asked the kids, hey, you know, you've been really good this week. You've done all your chores. You've done, you know, done well in school. What would you like? You know, and this is what upsets me, that people blasted these people. So this lady who posted the comment, she said, you know, she had $67 to her name. That was it. That's all the money they had. And, you know, how many Americans can relate to that? I will guarantee you it's a lot. And of course, you know, you have to think of your children first. They said, hey, what can we do for you? Well, they had been to some hot dog vendor in St. Charles. I don't know who this hot dog man is, never heard of it. And they went there, I don't know, a month ago, they said, and they paid $40 for the same thing. I think it was like 2 hot dogs, a mini pizza, and 1 other food item. So that's 4 food items. That's it. Four food items for their 4 children. So obviously they weren't even buying anything for themselves, the parents. They were buying something for their 4 children. They said it was $40, which is pretty typical when you think about it. $10 a person. That's actually fairly affordable these days, at a hot dog cart. Okay. So they went to this hot dog person and spent $40. Well, so the kids wanted to go back. That's what they chose as their reward. So they went back to this hot dog guy, whoever he might be. And this time it was 60 something dollars, $65. And that left them no money left. They'd already were there. They were with their kids. They had no idea that the menu had increased in such a high degree. And they talked to the guy, and the guy said, hey, you know, what can I tell you? I have to pass along the cost. I hadn't raise my prices in 10 years, and I had no choice but to raise my prices, which is understandable. It's nothing against that guy either. Prices are high. The restaurants are raising the prices of their food items because they're getting charged more. And so, of course, they're going to pass that on to the consumer. But people were blasting this couple. They're like, why didn't you cook hot dogs at home? Why do you only have $67 to your name? Obviously you shouldn't be doing anything for your kids. It was terrible how these people were treated online in a public forum. And if you're one of those people who made a terrible comment to these people, I hope you really rethink how you handled that situation, because there were hundreds of comments. It was awful. How many Americans right now can afford to take your children out or take your family out and eat at a restaurant? Not many, not many. I'll tell you that. And I could go on about this all day, and I'm not going to. I'm going to stop myself right there. But I'll tell you, it's a bad situation people are facing right now. Jay says 15-hour minimum wage doesn't help. No, Jay, it doesn't. And it's really hard because, the problem is, Jay, and I think you know this, I'm not arguing against you because you are 100% correct. A person cannot live today on $15 an hour. You absolutely cannot. Not even, it used to be, well, if you made $15 an hour, you could go get a roommate and then you could survive that way. Not anymore. Now you have 2, 3, 4 roommates if you're making $15 an hour to survive. I just watched a whole video this weekend on homeless people in the St. Louis area who, a lot of them had jobs and they go to work every day, but they're still homeless because they cannot afford to pay rent. It's ridiculous. And Jay says there's no shortage of judgmental know-it-alls. Isn't that the truth? These people, Jay, they were blasted, absolutely blasted. And I felt bad for these people because you know what? Yes, they should have, when they walked in the restaurant. Yes, they should have looked at the prices and say, "Gee, this hot dog that I paid $10 for, a month ago is now $15." And I don't know the menu items. I don't even know the place. And then they could have turned around and left. But how disappointing would that have been to their children? I feel for these people. There's a lot of people who absolutely do not have the money to survive. They just don't. And it's a really sad state we're in. And yes, we could pay a higher minimum wage, but then guess what happens? Do you think, let's say your local McDonald's, I'm going to use McDonald's as an example. Let's say, or your Walmart, let's say they're forced to bring minimum wage up to $20 an hour, because this is happening in California. Fast food workers are making up to $25 an hour or more. And especially, as a starting price, about $20, $23 an hour there. And well, do you think that McDonald's is going to take that hit? Do you really think that McDonald's is going to say, okay, I'm going to pay all of these workers $20, $25 an hour so they can have a reasonable cost of living? And I'm just going to take that out of the profit? No, they're going to raise prices. Remember what it used to cost? I just remember, gosh, 2 years ago, maybe, I think it was 2 years ago, or maybe right before during COVID, when you could go to McDonald's, you could get a cheeseburger, a soda, and a small French fry for about $3.50. Do that now, and it's over $6. The prices have doubled. They're going to pass those costs on to you. They doubled, and they didn't even raise the minimum wage. The prices doubled. Now, I know McDonald's is trying to backtrack on some of their prices because they raised the prices too high, but it's too late. Too late. And Jay says, my first job was 3.335 an hour. Jay, when I started working when I was 15. I'm one of those people, a lot of you probably were, where my parents always told me that once you turn 16, you have to buy all of your own clothes. If there's anything you want, you have to pay for it, because we don't pay for it anymore now. You're old enough to get a job. So when I was 15, I was in one of those school deals where I went to school half a day and then I left and I went to work. I started working when I was 15 years old. And my very first job was at a Burger King. My friend's dad owned a glass company, and they supplied the glass to this Burger King. And so she and I were able to get a job there. And I loved that job. I worked at the window. I was the window person that took the orders. They never let me cook or do any of that stuff, but I took the orders, and probably because I was always happy and smiley. But I love that job. But I made like $3 an hour, I think I made $3.35 an hour also. So we probably started working about the same time, Jay. And I lived at home with my parents, not a big deal. But when I was older and worked when I was about 17 or 18, I was making it's like $6 an hour. And I'm telling you, as a young adult, you can't live on that. I couldn't live right now on $15 an hour. There is no possible way, no possible way. Anyway, I have carried on long enough about that because it's something I'm very passionate about. Is that, what? There are a lot of people out there right now struggling. Please have some compassion for those people. Not everybody's doing great, not everybody is. So please have some compassion for those people. Some of the other things I want to talk about really quick. A lot of people ask me, I get a lot of messages over the weekend sometimes or during the week. And this weekend, particularly, I had a lot of messages. A couple people asked me about the market, the crypto crash. I didn't realize that there was a planned stock market crypto crash. I still don't really understand it, and I haven't had time to look into it. But after people kept messaging me about it, I thought, I didn't have time to research it, but I pulled up my own crypto accounts and they were way down. Now I took that as to be an advantage and I bought more, and so when the markets are down, you buy more. Now a lot of people are telling me that Donald Trump intentionally crashed the stock market and intentionally crashed the crypto market. I don't know if that's true. And I don't see what benefit he would have from doing that other than allowing people to buy back in, at lower rates. But I think a lot of people are fearful right now they've got the government shut down. We've got 4,000 people, government workers that have been fired. Now, Donald Trump, the Trump administration did fire or let go a bunch of people from the CDC, but then they retracted that and they hired those people back. They brought them back. So I don't think that's happening in the CDC, but still over 4,000 people within the government have been fired. Federal workers have lost their jobs. And guess what? They say there's going to be many more. They said they're hoping and aiming for about 10,000 federal workers to be let go to save a little bit of money for the country. And let's see. Jay says there are some families buying something together and sharing costs. You mean houses, Jay, or apartments to share costs? I'm all for that. Mandy says, "Yep, my first job was at a pizza place. I made $3.17 an hour plus tips. It was my favorite job." Right, Mandy? Boy, we're back when we were young and innocent, right? Everything was fun. I couldn't do it today. I couldn't do it today. But people have changed. I'm not trying to, sidetrack and go back to that same conversation, but just to touch base on that, people have changed. I remember when I worked at that Burger King. I didn't work there very long because my family moved from Chicago to St. Louis, when I was 16. So I wasn't there that long enough. But I worked at that job that entire time. And I remember working at the drive-through window. I was very friendly and the customers were very friendly. Everybody was just really nice. I can recall maybe one or two occasions where people were angry, but for the most part, everyone was very nice. Of course, I'm also very thorough and I made sure people got their right orders and like what we see today. It's a whole different story today. I try not to eat fast food or go to fast food places, but sometimes, if you're working really hard and it's late or sometimes you just have to. But it seems like the service I get now, and this is happening more times than I can tell you, and the rare occasions I've gone, is that you go through a drive-through and the person who's working, they just throw your bag at you. They don't even smile. They don't say hello. They just throw it at you. They stare at you, give it to you, and that's it. There's no interaction or customer service. And I'm always thinking, how did these people with these terrible personalities get hired? I just don't get it. And then on the flip side of that, people are angrier these days. And I can only imagine somebody, I don't know anyone that works in the fast food industry to ask, but I can only imagine the angry customers that come through and the impatient people. And they probably have a lot to deal with these days. It's probably a very different world than when all of us worked in the food industry, that's for sure. But again, I don't remember what I was talking about, but the crypto market. I saw this morning, speaking of the fall of crypto, that in Ukraine there was a guy named Konstantin Kalik. Now I don't know Gaelic. I don't know him, but he committed suicide over the crypto market falling. And now if you have a lot of crypto, you probably got some very serious losses. However, what I don't understand is a lot of people see the drops in stock, the drop in crypto as an opportunity to buy. Try to see the positives out of it because I promise you, the stock market will go back up again. Don't sell. That's the last thing you should do. Some people freak out when the stock market crashes and they start selling things. Don't sell anything. Same for crypto. Don't sell your crypto. Now, granted, I am not a financial expert by any means. I'm just giving you my own advice. Never sell. Just buy more. And Lori says, I definitely have compassion for others who are also trying to help themselves. If you are getting your nails done, newest phone, etc., come on now. Right. That doesn't make me inclined to help. But those that are doing everything they can do to better their situation, I would give you the shirt off my back. Exactly, Lori. And unfortunately, I do see those cases where, you have people out asking for money, or I see a lot of Facebook posts. Sometimes people I know, sometimes strangers, saying, hey, I'm having a really tough time right now. This is my Venmo or my Cash App. If you can only send me $20 or $30 or something. And now I've never sent money, but I'll see those same people who are posting, see pictures of their vehicle, or they're out boating, or, they're on vacation. I'm like, if you can afford to go boating, I haven't taken a vacation and I don't even know how many years, a very long time. Back when I was on the edge, or back in the days with Vic, Eric, and Chris, out in Lake St. Louis. I haven't had a vacation since then. So I don't sympathize with people. If you're out taking vacation, you're buying a new vehicle. I bought a used Jeep recently, and that's how I would never spend money on a new vehicle. But these people, because they depreciate too quickly, I'm not going to give you money. If you're out doing all these fun things that I can't even do because I'm working my butt off every darn day, forget it. Forget it. And Vernon says, my first job as a logger was $2.76 an hour. But Vernon and Mandy and Lori and Jay, all the people who've commented about that, it seemed like back then, even if we made $2, $3 an hour, $4, $6 an hour, the money went further. It wasn't great by any means. It was difficult to survive on also, but it went so much further. And now, if you're making $25 an hour, quite honestly, it's hard to survive. It really is. You're still going to probably live in a smaller home, a smaller apartment, even at $25 an hour. You have to be, there's such a disparity. And isn't there anymore? There's no middle class. There's no middle ground. You either make a lot of money and you live very well, or you're on that downward slope where you're struggling to get by. I don't feel like there's a whole lot of middle ground there. And of course, that was what Democrats wanted to do, was to get rid of the middle class. That is for sure. So don't worry about the crypto. Don't worry about the stock market. If you're one of the people who asked me about that this weekend, those numbers will definitely go back up. They might get lower, and that just tells you that buy more, but they will go back up. And a lot of people are worried, of course, about the situation with China. And that was also another reason for the stock market to go down a bit, as well as crypto, is because Donald Trump announced that starting November 1st, we're going to tariff China 100%. Now, I promise you that's not going to happen. That is not going to happen. That is how Donald Trump negotiates. We're not going to tariff China 100%. That is not going to happen. And that's why he said November 1st. If he meant business, he would say starting today. Now, two things happened. One is there was a report released that said China owns 70% of the rare earth minerals. We kind of touched base a little bit, I think, on Friday and talked about that for just a brief second. And of course, we're in desperate shape. We need rare earth minerals so we can get back to production, making our planes and our missiles and so on. We need those rare earth minerals. But well, of course, very strategically, a lot of these countries don't want to give them to us, and that includes China. So two things happened. One, Donald Trump is upset about their rare earth minerals and that they control 70% of the rare earth minerals. And China is moving every day towards more. They're taking over in Africa. Why? To get more rare earth minerals. So yes, that's a growing problem. But also, and I haven't really heard this mentioned yet, but on, I think it was Friday or Saturday, Friday after the show or Saturday, I also read that China started charging a fee to all of our ships in their ports. So those things probably did aggravate Donald Trump. If you're worried about this 100% tariff against China, it is not going to happen. As we get closer to November 1st, they're going to work out some kind of a deal. Or if they put it through, it might last a day or so. I don't expect even that to happen. We're not going to do that. I'm not saying China is our ally by any means, but they do control most of our country because they control a lot of our products and as well as our medication. Yeah, I'm not going to go down the list because you guys already know. So don't worry about that. I think I have covered most of what I wanted to talk about. Something that two more things that I really wanted to talk about is that Donald Trump made a weird statement. And he stated that he doesn't think he's going to go to heaven. I don't know how many of you heard that. Now, why he would say that, I don't know. And I didn't hear it in maybe its fullest context. But us as Christians, and I would think I'm kind of an odd statement from Donald Trump. Now, only Donald Trump knows what he has done in his life. Only he knows. We know he's a womanizer. We all voted for him regardless because I could care less what he's doing in his private life with his wives and girlfriends. Honestly, I could care less. He could have 3 girlfriends right now. It wouldn't make any difference to me at all. What I care about is lowering the prices Americans are paying, how much tax we pay, and the safety, our national security, and so on. That's what I care about. What he's doing in his bedroom could care less. But I don't know what he was alluding to. That's the only thing I could think of when he said he doesn't think he's going to go to heaven. But we also don't know. As a president makes a lot of decisions, and a lot of those decisions are life and death, decisions. We definitely did have a role in what happened in Syria, with Al Qaeda taking over and Assad having to flee. There were a lot of lives lost because of our role in that situation. We've had a little bit of a role in what's happened between Israel and Gaza, and a lot of lives lost in that situation as well. We've had a very large role in what's happening in Ukraine and Russia, and those decisions do lead to the loss of life. There have been hundreds of thousands of lives lost as well, in that conflict. And I'm sure all of this stuff probably weighs on Trump's mind. And I don't know, from a religious standpoint, I would love to talk to a minister or a preacher, about how this would work. It's a very unique circumstance because not many people, get to be president and get to make these decisions that are life and death situations for, potentially millions of other people, and there have been a lot of lives lost at the hand of every president because they have to make decisions that involve our national security. And to keep us safe, a lot of other people have to die. I hate to say that, and I don't want it to be that way. But look what's happening even in the Caribbean and Venezuela. There are people there. Yes, they're drug dealers and people involved in the drug industry, but they are still souls. They are still lives. They are still God's children, no matter how misguided they are. But we have to make decisions to protect ourselves. We have to take the lives of others. I can't imagine what Donald Trump could have been talking about when he talked about this. That's the only thing I can think of. And as a Christian, I would hope that he would realize that no matter what decisions you make in your life, if you repent and if you confess your sins, if you obviously are sorry for what you did and go through those steps of repenting, then yes, I do think you can go to heaven. Am I wrong? I mean, I might be wrong, but that's how I've always felt, that even the worst of the person, to me, that's what God has told us, is that even the worst of people, if you repent your sins and you do have that salvation in Jesus Christ, that you will still go to heaven. So I could be wrong about all that, but that's how I've always felt about it. Because you know what? I've said this many times in the past. We're all sinners, every last one of us. Give me a person who has not sinned. And I don't recall anywhere in the Bible where it says one sin is greater than another. There's a lot of different things out there that fall under that category of committing a sin. And I've never read it one is more than the other. And Dottie says, "Oh, you were a bank teller for $2.15. After 1 year, I got a 10-cent raise, $4 a week raise, but I could fill my gas tank." Exactly, Dottie. Exactly. Money stretched a lot further back then. Lori says, "You're absolutely correct. That makes me sad that he thinks that." Yeah, Lori. And it seemed like a very heartfelt thing that he said. And I know he's a Christian. And I think as a Christian, and I know he has spiritual, or I should say faith advisors. Hopefully they've talked him down out of that statement and said, Donald Trump, you're going to be very welcome at the pearly gates, because, these lives, a lot of these lives would have been lost either way, maybe even more lives lost had you not made the decisions that you made. Yes, we might be taking the lives of, a number of people in the drug trafficking industry out in the Caribbean and over in Venezuela. But guess what? We had over 300,000 people in our country, Americans, that died from overdosing, from just fentanyl alone. That doesn't even include the other drugs, fentanyl alone. And if we can stop those drugs from coming into this country, then guess what? You're going to save a lot of lives. I see Donald Trump as being a person who saves lives, not takes lives. So it's the flip side of how you look at it. But again, I really have no idea what he was talking about. I really don't. And yes, Nancy, you're absolutely correct. God paid for our sins. That is absolutely correct. And thank you for adding that in. Sometimes I get at a loss for words for things. And other than that, I don't think that's pretty much it. I just want to make sure there is a No Kings protest coming up on Saturday, October the 18th. I would suggest on these No Kings Day, when they have these No Kings protests, just stay clear. If you know where one's going to be, stay clear of those areas. These are dangerous people. Not all of them, but a lot of these people are dangerous. You might have a crowd of 100 people out on these No Kings Days, let's say in one area. And out of that group, maybe one or two of them, that's all it takes, one or two, to really be the real agitators and to go out and start harming innocent civilians or anything else. So better to just stay away. And Linda said, if you are truly saved, you are saved. You can't gain salvation by works, so don't lose it. It's all about your relationship with Jesus. Yes, it is, Linda. You have got that right. I'm looking, I don't think there's anything else to talk about. Something we'll talk about tomorrow. A lot of people are kind of going over this, and I don't really know what to think about it. They're calling it the digital Holocaust. And that is that there's a lot of people who are claiming that over on X, formerly Twitter, now it's, of course, as you guys know, it's X, that there's a lot of posts out there that are aimed at Israelis and saying some very bad things. They call it a digital Holocaust, that there's a lot of anti-Semitism taking place because they don't allow that on Facebook. And Facebook, would censor out that information. And they're claiming that X does not censor it. I haven't personally seen that within my feed. So I'm going to go out, my best guess is they're talking, but I don't know. That's why it's confusing to me, because I wouldn't think there's a lot of Antifa folks, liberals posting over on X these days. I thought most of them left, and those are usually the anti-Semitic folks. So I'm going to make my way over to X today. I haven't had much time to look, but I'm going to do that and see what's going on with the digital Holocaust. And Curtis says, not everyone is a child of God. Only those who have accepted Jesus Christ as their Lord and Savior. Yes, God loves everyone and created everyone, but only those of us that are Christians are considered children of God. Also true, Curtis, but don't you consider Donald Trump to be a child of God? I mean, he, remember that Trump said, now, prior to what happened in Butler, Pennsylvania, I don't feel that his faith was quite as strong because he considers himself born again. He's made this statement before. He said that when that shooting happened in Butler, Pennsylvania, because it missed him by a fraction, he now considers himself born again. And he realized that was divine intervention that saved his life that day. So now, prior to that day, I don't know. Maybe he lived his life in a different way. I think we can guess that he did. It's so funny because Democrats are always slamming Donald Trump. He's a womanizer, which, he raped people, blah, blah, blah. I don't think Donald Trump's ever raped anyone. That's for sure. I don't think he's ever sexually assaulted anyone, but we know Biden did. Democrats don't want to call out Biden, do they? In fact, all they talked about was how faithful he is. Him and Nancy Pelosi going to church. No, the people at Biden's church said they never saw him there. That was just fantasy, not a reality. But people don't want to talk about that, do they? Tara Reid, look that name up, and you'll find all about Biden. But with Trump, he says he's born again. I don't know why he made this statement. I wish I had some clarification or context to it. I think he's wrong, of course, but I do hope that he's born again. I don't know what happened prior to him being born again, and maybe that's what he was referring to. All we can do is kind of guess. Well, guys, that is it for me today. I think I've covered everything I planned to talk to. Went way over, as I usually have been doing. I swore I wasn't going to go over today, but I have. Just too much to talk about. So glad to have Col Joe Adams on the show today. Can't wait to talk about that tomorrow. We've got some things to talk about tomorrow. I'm going to touch base on the digital Holocaust like we just talked about, because in my personal feed, I have not seen that. I have seen nothing but support for Israel within my feed. So I'm going to have to go outside of the normal people that I am back and forth with and follow on X to see if I can see what other people are talking about, because I have not personally seen it. But I'm going to look into that. And a lot of people say, well, it comes from this whole Charlie Kirk situation, and how a lot of people believe that maybe somebody from Israel, I don't think Israel or anybody from Israel ordered the death of Charlie Kirk. I'll say that right now. I don't believe it. Don't think it's a possibility. But we'll talk about digital Holocaust tomorrow. I want to talk about Houston and the Houston bayous and what's going on with those 53 bodies that have been found since 2023. We have to talk about that. I don't care what anybody else says. It seems like a serial killer situation to me. We're going to cover that tomorrow. We're also still going to talk about the smiley face killer tomorrow. And the reason why is because, again, those deaths have continued. And some people are saying, well, maybe they're part of the same thing, very similar MOs. So we're going to get into that tomorrow. I've studied the smiley face killer, situation for a really long time. And it's something that people really need to watch out for. It's not an empty threat. There truly is a serial killer out there. In fact, the FBI a couple years ago, I don't know what the latest statistics are, but a couple of years ago, they said that there was at any given time about 50 serial killers operating in the United States, and at least 2 or 3 of them at that time were truck drivers, who went city to city, state to state, having victims. So we're going to touch base. I'm going to see if I can find some new figures on that. We'll talk about that tomorrow. But in the meantime, Curtis, Vernon says, read your Bible about David. And Curtis says, I was not speaking of Trump, but it is concerning that he says he's not going to heaven if he knows what being a Christian is about. I agree, Curtis. I'm going to look for the more context on that. I couldn't find anything yesterday to give a little bit more context to it, but I'm very curious about that myself, and why he would say such a thing, especially being a born again Christian. I'm very curious about that. And we'll touch base on that again tomorrow also. But I do hope you guys all have a really good day. Thank you so much for hanging in there with me. And we'll touch base about that tomorrow. I didn't have time to get into Marjorie Taylor Greene today and her statements about deportation. We'll cover that tomorrow. We'll just push it to another day. But thank you again. I hope you all have a great day today. It's going to be a beautiful day on top of that. And I will look forward to seeing you all tomorrow. Have a good day, everybody. I'm Tabitha Hassell with Tabs on Tabs.